So what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. It has been a while since the last episode as I've been away, but we're back today with a fantastic guest. He is a high-performance coach to executives and entrepreneurs, Mr. Doughty. How you doing, man?
Doing very well. It is great to be here. It's a bright spot on my rainy Friday.
It's actually been very sunny here in the UK for once, which is a bit crazy. So whereabouts are you located, Joey?
I'm in Georgia in the United States.
Awesome. Amazing, man. Great. Well, thank you for coming onto the podcast. I'm really excited to get you on because I've been a huge fan of the content you've put out on Twitter and the rebrand that you've done with your business, which is super cool. And I really want to dive into kind of the work you're doing because I think it would be very useful to the audience that are listening today. So if I didn't cover it there, Joey, you just want to tell the audience a bit about yourself, what you do and how you got here?
Yeah, totally. So I am Cypreneur. That's what I go by with my business. And like Oliver said, I am a high performance coach for entrepreneurs and executives. So the things that I work on with my clients is essentially helping them perform better so they can do more of what they need to do in their business to earn more money and or have more free time. That's the two goals that we all have with our businesses. So I have been studying cognitive science, psychology, and neuroscience for about 3 years now. I've coached many people on different topics. And, I started off on YouTube. Back then, I was pretty reserved and quiet, so it wasn't a great fit. It was basically like, little science lectures, which nobody's on YouTube for that kind of thing. So I had a bit of an existential crisis and decided to try out Twitter at the start of 2020. And honestly, that wound up being not only the best decision that I made last year, but that decision has already changed my life, and it will completely change my life. I focused on Twitter all of last year, experimented with a couple different topics and niches and grew an incredible network of friends, including yourself. And it's been unreal. The things I was able to do on Twitter last year. And it was a good timing with the lockdown. So I was able to really focus on that without, social obligations or anything like that. So it really worked out. And I was grateful to have that to focus on so that I wasn't getting distracted by the news and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, this side of Twitter, if anyone's not on this side of Twitter that's listening, get your fucking ass on money Twitter, fitness Twitter, mindset Twitter, whatever you want to call it, because I wake up every day. And yeah, I started out probably at the beginning of 2020 as well, delving into this area. And every day I wake up motivated. I meet cool new people, I learn new things. It's a legit life hack, man, which is super cool. So Joey, what made you kind of go from, I know previously you had a different brand, you kind of rebranded. What made you go into the direction you're now in?
So, when I started, for those who don't know, I was Improvement Geek up until a few months ago. So that name was partially an homage to two of my favorite creators on YouTube, which are Improvement Pill and College Info Geek. Plus, I went to school for computer engineering. I was a gamer, consider myself a geek. And that's honestly kind of a compliment here in the United States. But some people told me, that's not such a compliment in other cultures and other languages. They can be pretty negative. People think that it's self deprecating and they may not want to work with somebody that calls himself a geek. So I did some brainstorming, asked some friends, and came up with the name Cypreneur because I wanted to focus on really entrepreneurs and, of course, executives as well with psychology and neuroscience. So I mashed some words together and came up with Cypreneur. And I feel like Cypreneur really captures the essence of my mission and my focus with my brand and my business. And it's just kind of a cooler name. It feels sleeker. The funny thing is, I've gotten a lot of compliments about the name change. And some people told me, I didn't want to say anything back then, but your old name kind of sucked. And I'm like, yeah, I feel that. I got you. But I'm glad everybody's digging the new name.
Yeah,
Or at
I've got
least
to
they
say,
told me they are.
I've got to say as well, I'm definitely a fan of the new name, and I much prefer it over the old name. It's got a nice ring to it, and it sums up, ideally what you do, which is great. So, psychology. What made you go into kind of that realm and that field from a younger age?
I'm really glad you asked that because it'll be of interest to you. So, if you know my story, I used to be over 370 pounds. I was pre-diabetic, low testosterone, all that good stuff. And so, over the span of several years, I had a journey, a roller coaster of weight loss. Well, in the summer of 2018, I was really close to my goal, which was 180 pounds at the time, but I had a little bit left. The last bit can be the hardest. So I actually started reading self-help books for the first time. And the first one I ever read was Maximum Achievement by Brian Tracy. Highly recommend it. It gets a little bit woo-woo, but it's fine. So I kind of got addicted to self-help books for a few weeks, as a lot of people do. And I quickly got tired of the cliches and the nonsense, the feel good, kind of thing. So I decided to start studying psychology and neuroscience to really understand my brain and what was happening. So I could, keep improving myself physically, mentally, and so on. And then, from there, a few months later, I realized I could start using my knowledge to help others because, people, the average person doesn't have time to read a ton of books and filter all that information. They may not have, the awareness of certain things. So I decided to start creating content that would actually help people. So I was utilizing that cognitive science knowledge.
Epic, man. And you're definitely right there. I think when it comes to especially psychology, there's so much information out there. It's very hard to break down into bite-sized chunks. If you're an exec, if you're an entrepreneur, you can do a lot of reading, and even some of the biggest readers can't, consume all of that information. So I love the service that you offer. And you said there about the weight loss, man. That's crazy. So you were 317 pounds, did you say? And how much did you lose?
I went from 370 to down to 189 was my lowest.
Fuck, that's like crazy. That's nearly 200 pounds.
Yep.
So I got to ask you, man, what made you kind of 370 pounds to begin with, man? What was that like?
So the summary of that is I didn't have a lot of guidance from my parents about good stuff to eat. I was unofficially homeschooled, and that basically meant that I didn't go to school before college. So I didn't have a lot of guidance on what I ate. I drank a lot of sugary stuff, ate a lot of sugary stuff. And then when I was 16, I got addicted to World of Warcraft. And I was playing World of Warcraft 12 to 16 hours every single day. That was my life for a few years. And so I just sat in my room playing WoW, eating, drinking soda and stuff like that. And that just kind of happens. So that was the peak, thankfully. And at the time I was living in Florida, coastal Florida, so very warm, humid summers. And what started bothering me was I would try to go walk to the park that was right down the street from our apartment complex. And, it was just virtually impossible for me to go walk a mile. So between that and the one doctor visit I had where I found out I was pre-diabetic, I knew that I had to change something or else I might not have a lot of life left. So that was where that was really the turning point for me.
I bet, man. Crazy. So basically just from sitting down and the
Yep.
sugary drinks and World of Warcraft, you found that you gained weight, which you would do, right? And what was the shift that caused you to kind of lose the weight? Then when was the time where you said, I need to lose this weight?
So the time that I realized I really needed to lose weight was those walks to the park that didn't go on for very long or very far, and that doctor visit. That finally made it clear to me that something was wrong, something needed to change, and then it was kind of like I said, it was a roller coaster. I started. My mom and I moved to Tennessee, a couple states north, and I started working at a construction company, working outside in the summer, wearing jeans and a thick t-shirt. So physical activity outside, away from my food and my chair. So I lost a lot of weight real quick just from that. And then I started college about a year later, and I would stress eat really badly and board eat. But stress eat really badly every final season. So I would lose some weight and then I would gain like 10 pounds back every final season. So it was a roller coaster there for a while. And then later on in college, I really wanted to lose that weight before I graduated. So I got down to, like I said, 189, which was close. Wasn't my entire goal, but I got really close. And, the big things that did it for me were things like fasting, things like tracking my food, very basic stuff, but done consistently. The simple things done consistently allow you to achieve big things.
For sure. And I'm glad that you touched on that there, because there was a tweet by some guy recently, I think on Twitter, Mark, someone, and he's basically said that carbohydrates cause obesity, the end, or something like that.
Mm.
And I kind of had to laugh at that because, carbohydrates, okay, if you consume too many of them, for excessive amounts, then yes, you can be obese. And, essentially that's what happened with you when you gained that weight, right? You were drinking lots of sugary stuff. However, the issue is not around the carbs itself, because carbs are still in your life now, but the difference is your relationship with it, right? And probably the relationship with yourself and the education that you have around stuff, right? Things like intermittent fasting, which is a great tool if you're a busy professional or exec looking to lose fat. Fantastic way to cut calories. The same as just generally tracking your food. Such a useful way to have accountability with your diet and to see, actually what we're doing. And on my programs, all of my programs, we do calorie tracking because it is the most effective way to lose body fat. And, if you want to have different bits of food here and there, you can do it with tracking calories because you have the flexibility. Instead of potentially doing a diet which cuts all of that out and leaves you to just eat one food source, it's not very fun. All right.
Yeah, that's the thing, is you need to find what works for you and what's sustainable for you. So intermittent fasting, the tool that I love that's helped me out, losing and maintaining weight. I've actually been doing low carb for the past month or so, but that's
Nice.
purely because I like doing low carb sometimes. It works for me. And at the same time, I realize that that doesn't work for everybody. That's not the one true way to do it. And I think that there's a lot of tribalism in the diet and fitness cultures about, whether you're low carb or low fat or carnivore or vegan or whatever. It just doesn't really matter, man. Just like do what works for you, is my opinion.
100%. And I have to agree with that. I do like to take a balanced view when it comes to this kind of stuff, because you're right. What works for one person doesn't work for another person, depending on their schedule.
Mhm.
And there's a big thing called bio-individuality, which is obviously no one size fits all approach. And, I do low carb sometimes. I'm not going to be anti low carb, but I know for my lifestyle, I like to go out and have drinks with my buddies. I like to eat pizza. So for me, a more flexible approach works. But I've got clients that are doing one meal a day and that works for them, right? Like it's easy for them to do. So I think you touched on a good point there. And it is crazy the amount of cultish behavior that you see on Twitter, man. It's like, it's crazy. I've never seen so much. People get so angry about you talking about their diet. Like if I do a tweet against keto to get a bit of engagement, what happens is I get people attack me, man. I get people
Yep.
attack me like, I've just thrown their baby off a cliff. And it's like, whoa, hang on a minute. It's not that deep. It's just a diet, man.
Well, the problem with that is that a lot of people identify with certain things.
Yeah.
There's a parallel with that to the news and politics, and that's something that the news really helps engineer and instigates and preys upon, is that tribalism. Here in America, red team versus blue teams literally is what it is.
Yeah.
And so people get so tribal and get so angry at the other side. And there's a whole host of, well, relatively simple mental things related to that. But yeah, it's really frustrating to see how angry people get over things that don't really matter all that much. I mean, basically just comes down to do what works for you and let other people do what works for them. I mean, it seems simple, but
Yeah, it's very simple, but it's hard for a lot of people. And I think a lot of that is down to general mindset, right? The way that you view the world, your perspective, and things like that. And I know when I was kind of younger, I did have this kind of like, I was very reactive. I was very like affected by external factors. And I guess through learning things like psychology, you get an understanding of why you behave in a certain way, you're able to kind of rewire your brain there and change.
mhm.
Which is really important. I know that's a lot of the work you do. So, I mean, what typically, the clients that come to you, what do you find that are the biggest issues that they're having with their kind of mindset?
So the biggest thing that I've noticed with my clients is they're too busy to be productive, I'll say. They typically don't have the best time management or the best self-management, and they recognize that. But they think that they're too busy to get 8 hours of sleep. They're too busy to exercise. They're too busy to plan out their days and schedule their time. When in reality, when you start doing these things, you're more effective with the rest of the time that you have. So you wind up saving time. So it really starts with changing that perspective so that people understand how important these fundamental things are, because you have to have a strong foundation of, like I said, self management and time management to be able to build on it. It's kind of like pouring the concrete so you can build a skyscraper. If you're lazy with the foundation and then start building on top of it, the building's going to fall over. It's very similar. If you build systems on top of broken systems, bad habits or habits that aren't very well created, it's all going to fall apart. It's going to catch up to you eventually. And that's going to lead to burnout. It's going to lead to people losing money, businesses falling apart, people falling apart. And so that's what I help people avoid.
100%. And I think that you touched on a good point there regarding a foundation, because again, that's a big thing that I try and advocate to my own clients and people. It's you need to have the basics down, and it's not sexy, right? Trying to get enough sleep, trying to drink enough water, and exercise a few times a week at least. It's not sexy, and it's, sometimes you just have to put yourself through it. But once you build the habit, what you're going to then find is everything else starts to become a lot easier, right? You find that, you're able to concentrate more during conversations. You're not falling asleep in the middle of the night. You're not relying in the middle of the day. Sorry. You're not relying on caffeine so much, and you start to build this momentum. And I think that with a lot of people, they need that momentum to get them going. And I know that I'm someone like that. When I don't have momentum, I can kind of get myself into a rut. And the more that I sleep, the more that I do the basics, like drink enough water, get enough sunlight, all of this shit that we know is good for us, it starts to snowball into better things. And then my mind changes, right? I start to think, whoa, like these problems are not as bad. I'm not less anxious. I start to feel like I can maybe challenge myself a bit more. And this just compounds. And that's how I think success happens, is through that process.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned how this stuff isn't sexy, but it gets pretty sexy results. When I start my clients off with working on their sleep and doing, journaling, meditation, time management, it doesn't sound sexy when I'm telling them when we're starting off, but then a few days, a week later, they're like, this is changing my life. So once you explain why this stuff is so important, I've found that really helps people, because it's very easy as a coach, and I've had coaches do this to me, but it's very easy for a coach to just tell someone to do something. But when you explain why, the psychology and neuroscience for me and the physiological side for you, if you explain why we're doing these things, that really helps people appreciate the point. If I just told my clients, yeah, get 8 hours of sleep and go buy a planner from Walmart or Tesco, sorry, and write down your time, they're just going to be like, why? I could have read this in a fortune cookie somewhere, like, what's the point? So once you help people see the value in these little things, they start realizing that this is going to enable them to do bigger things than they've ever been able to do before.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with that. I always say to my clients, get 8 to 9 hours sleep. The reason being is you're going to make hell more gains if you do, right? So, it's just one of those things. And the same happens with your brain and things like that. I think, you touched on a good point there, sleep, which is so important. I mean, a big thing that I think people miss out on is that deep and that REM sleep, which is so important for kind of cognitive function and your brain and things like that. And typically when I don't get those latter stages of sleep or longer hours, my brain just doesn't function properly. And I think it's important to know those sleep cycles, isn't it, when you're trying to perform at your best?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a couple things that play there. One is, people are waking up with alarms. They're typically waking up in the middle of a sleep cycle if they're not intentional, which causes sleep inertia, makes you feel groggy, and makes you want to go back to bed. And then the other aspect of it is, a lot of people don't know this, but your later sleep cycles are more restful. So somebody who thinks that they're good on 6 hours of sleep would actually probably benefit from getting another hour and a half of sleep, getting another sleep cycle. Sleep cycles are on average about 90 minutes. So if you're getting another sleep cycle, then you're going to feel more rested, essentially.
Yeah, for sure. Some really good points there. And you're right about like the difference between 6 and 9 is like night and day, right? Like it is absolutely night and day. I can't stress that enough. And I know, Joey, as well, when I was looking at your content, I saw that we had a little conversation around imposter syndrome. And I know
Yep.
that it's something I've kind of suffered from before. So do you want to talk a little bit around kind of imposter syndrome? Because I think the audience here will relate a lot to that as well.
Yeah, totally. So imposter syndrome is something that over 70% of people deal with at some point in their lives. And I would argue or wager rather that that's even higher when you're doing something on social media because you're always putting yourself out there, you're always risking being judged. Imposter syndrome is something that I've struggled with off and on throughout my entire life. And the thing about it is it never really goes away. I found that people, even at the highest level, still struggle with doubt. The thing is, imposter syndrome is emotional. It's just one of the ways that the brain's trying to protect us from risk and discomfort because it's wired to keep us safe. But the problem is that the safe life isn't the meaningful, rewarding, high achievement life. The safe life is boring. And so the people who are able to achieve anyway are people who ignore those emotions and listen to their logical side. So they learn to separate what the emotional thoughts are and what the logical thoughts are. And so they're able to essentially ignore the negative voice telling them that they're a failure, or they don't deserve to be where they are, that things are going to go bad, and they do it anyway. And it sounds so cliche to get to something that just comes down to just do it, but just doing it is really the cure to a lot of problems.
Yeah, taking that action for sure. And I
Yep.
think a big thing around, imposter syndrome is that kind of shame, right? Like people feel shame for who they are. And one thing that I've learned is the more shameless you can be and not care about that stuff, kind of the more liberated you can be. And it takes practice, right? It's like like you said, it's action. You've got to do your reps. You've got to put yourself out there and do things that are scary, man. Like starting a new Twitter account or approaching a hot chick or something. Like you have to. It doesn't happen by thinking about it. It doesn't matter by analyzing and just sitting and waiting, man. Nothing happens like that. Same as your body doesn't develop when you don't put the reps in. The same goes for everything else that is hard to begin with. You've got to get out there. And one thing that I saw that was incredible was this guy on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen this, Joey, but he was doing a no fap challenge, right? Which is obviously everybody knows what no fapping is, which is basically not masturbating. And he was doing vlogs every single day of his no fap, and the titles were hilarious because they were some days he would fail and he'd go no fap failed, but he was just so out in the open that he just was so shameless that he didn't give a shit, man. Like he was just like, this is me. I'm doing this challenge. Some days I fuck up. People think I'm weird. I don't care. And he's just posting these videos all the time. And I think fair play to a guy like that,
Yeah.
right? He doesn't give a shit. Like he's shameless. He's himself. He's authentic. And, that is in itself just fantastic, man. I love it.
Well, the way you kind of got to think about it is, and we'll get a little bit dark here for a second, is, you know, are you going to be happy on your deathbed? Right? Are you going to be happy with the fact that you lived a safe life and no one ever laughed at you? No, no one's
No.
ever thinking that. They're filled with regret for all the things that they didn't do. They look back at all the things they could have done, the businesses they could have started, the girls they could have asked out, the cats that they could have pet, all these different things that they could have done. And, you know, being laughed at for something that you do, if that even happens, which people aren't that cruel. People don't think about us as much as we think they do. But even if people do laugh at us, it doesn't matter. Like it's better the potential gain is so much higher than the potential losses. And it's still going to lead to a much more fulfilling life, even if you try and fail. Like, college football players or whatever that don't get drafted to the NFL. I bet you that they're still glad that they tried. I bet you that they're a lot happier in that situation than they would be if they never even tried in the first place. So even if you fail, you're massively better off than the person who never tried.
100%. And I can definitely resonate with that. I remember when I was in my early 20s, there were times where I just didn't want to take the action. And I knew that there was this wall there, right, of inaction. And you might have been there before. You know that inside you want to do it, but you're forcing yourself to not do it. But you forcing yourself not to do it is causing you so much stress and anxiety because you don't have the balls to do what you want to do. And as I started putting myself out there more and doing that, you find out that those worries are not that bad. And actually, people respect you for it because they say, man, this guy, he's putting himself out there. He's starting his new business. He's launching this Twitter account. He's putting out YouTube videos. That's fucking hard. Fair play to the guy. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like you actually get this double win. You overcome your fear and people actually respect you for it. And you don't get the embarrassment that you thought. And if you do, the embarrassment usually isn't that bad. Like you said, people aren't that cruel.
Yeah, see, that relates to something that I'm kind of becoming known for about the whole "don't tell people your goals" thing. It's
Yeah.
just like a borderline meme, a shit post, and hustle culture that I'm just absolutely sick of. But there's this, it relates to what you were saying because people have this idea that, oh, if you tell people your goals, then they're going to shit on your dreams and, they're going to try to tear you down, stab you in the back. If you have people in your life that you think are going to like laugh at your goals, much less try to tear you down, get them out of your life. That's the
Yeah.
first step to that. Like I don't understand why people think that the world is filled with toxic people. I wrote a tweet a couple months ago related to this. It was something like, children have imaginary friends. Adults or hustlers on Twitter have imaginary enemies. Like
Yeah. I love that.
people
I
aren't
love
that
that.
evil. Like I don't understand.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. And I've never thought that that was a bad thing because I listened to a podcast with Naval Ravikant, and he
Mhm.
actually, there's a story of him. He goes into a startup or something, and he goes into the startup and says to the people there, "Oh, I'm not going to be here in 6 months. I'm going to be running my new business soon, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
only here for a short period of time." And then 6 months passed. And then these guys were coming up to him at work going, "Naval, why are you still here? Aren't you going to be running that business, right?" So actually,
Yeah.
like by doing that, it gives you that kind of accountability, and like it says actually get your ass moving. You've got to do this. People are watching. And I think that that can be quite liberating, man. Knowing that you've said you're going to do something and doing it and putting it out there. There's nothing more ballsy than that, man. That's G. That's cool, right?
So here's an example that would be of interest to your community, though. Think about this in the context of telling your family that you want to lose weight. So you and I both know that, especially older people, parents, grandparents, that kind of thing, are resistant to people changing. Grandmas want to
For
force feed
sure.
us all the food in the world. But the thing is with that is families just want to keep us safe, really. Like that's the big thing. Typically, not all the time, obviously, for the actually people out there. But people, our family and friends typically want to keep us safe. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily. You just have to hold frame and do it anyway, basically, or
Yeah.
you can help educate them on why this is a good choice to lose weight or start a business or go on Twitter and talk about nofap or whatever. You kind of have to do it anyway, so you have to build resilience to the people who may not understand. There's a big difference in not like your aunt not understanding why you're starting Twitter versus your aunt like actively trying to destroy your dreams, which is what a lot of people seem to think that people are going to do.
That's such a good point there. Yeah, there's a difference between lack of knowledge and actually wanting the worst for someone, right? Because your aunt doesn't want the worst for you. She just doesn't understand this type of work that you're doing or thing that you're
Right.
doing. And you touched on a good point there about education too, because a lot of people don't understand why you might be having this diet. And I say this to my clients as well. It's about communication, right? You need to be able to communicate and say, look, I'm doing this diet at the minute. I've got this coach. He's going to help me lose weight. The reason why I want to do it is it's important for my overall health going forward, and it's going to make me happier, right? And in
Mhm.
whatever way you want to kind of put that across and communicate it, you need to do it, because a lot of people, they do stuff, and like you said, they don't explain what they're doing. And you don't have to explain yourself, but it's good to communicate to other people about what you're doing so they understand, right, what you're doing and things like that, especially if you're starting a new fat loss plan or a new project that is quite niche, or it's something that your parents wouldn't get or your family members wouldn't get.
Mhm. Yeah, especially if you think about things like low carb versus low fat, because 20 years ago, low fat was the big craze, and then things have kind of changed where it's like, no, we need to be eating eggs. We don't need to be eating sugar and bread all the time. I was reading an article yesterday talking about how, like, oh, we need to be eating like 80% of our calories from carbohydrates. Like, no, I don't think that's really accurate, but we just have to. I mean, my doctor highly recommended that I go vegan. It's like, no, not going to do that. Thank you though. I
No.
appreciate your input, but you know, it's just there's a lot of misinformation regarding diets, especially. There's a lot of misinformation that used to be common knowledge, and now like cross generationally, we have to help educate the people that were misled.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think a lot of these things that you see, the diet and stuff, and these articles, a lot of them are just clickbait titles, I think, just for
Mhm.
to get traction. And so then people reshare it and go, "This is outrageous." But then these
Yep.
guys get the clicks. But there are still people out there that like. I know people and family members that just don't have a clue about nutrition. I think nutrition is the one thing that people don't get. You could give them 10 questions on nutrition and they would get all 10 wrong, because that's how bad. I know in the UK here, the education in school for nutrition is not great. I don't know what it's like in the US, probably worse.
Probably, yeah. I Another thing is I don't think people understand the cumulative or the additive effects of things like inflammation. So one thing that I've been doing over the past couple of months while I've been doing low carb is cutting out particular oils like hydrogenated oil, soybean, peanut, canola, vegetable, all that stuff, because and preservatives, because they all cause inflammation. And it's like, yeah, cutting out one thing may not really make you feel much better, but if you cut out all of them, then you reduce a large chunk of your inflammation, then you're really going to feel a lot better. And then that helps justify the cost of these foods that don't have these things. But the big problem is, relating to your point about education with nutrition, is I don't think people really know what's in their food.
Yeah,
I don't think a lot of people read the labels of their food to see the thousand different ways sugar can be labeled, for example, and the preservatives and the chemicals that we can't even pronounce that are we're putting in our bodies. People are worried about vaccines and stuff like that, but then eating something that has a long list of chemicals that they don't even know what it is. And it's very unfortunate because, like I said, we don't even know the effects this stuff is having on us. Going back to inflammation and all these other potential discomforts and diseases that come along with that.
yeah, 100%. You touched on a really good point there around oils, especially. Avoid seed oils, guys, right? Avoid seed oils. Make sure you're having olive oil, you cook with butter and things like that. The reason
Yep.
being is, without getting too sciencey, the PUFAs, I think that's the right
Yep.
acronym. Basically, when you heat them up, what happens is it just wreaks havoc for your internal system, right? For your brain, for your hormones, lots of other things as well. And if you want to find out more about this, read a book called Deep Nutrition, a fantastic book, probably the best book on nutrition. Have you read that one, Joey?
It's on my list. I saw that it was quite a big book, so I'll get to it
Yeah,
hopefully
I
this
mean, I
year.
haven't. Yeah, I mean, I haven't got through all of it, to be honest, but I've been through certain chapters, and that was a big one around seed oils. So, yeah, and I think around education, there's a lot of like food. A lot of people eat takeout, right? And especially
Mhm.
with the busy guys that I work with, right? Like they're always going to different restaurants and things like that. And sometimes you can't have choice, but you know, things like, again, not go back to the sexy stuff, just meal prep, right? On the
Yeah.
Sunday, having your lunches ready. You know what's going into those foods. You know that there's not going to be as many, or if not hardly any, toxins in, because you're cooking them with the right oils. It's raw food, there's no additives. That's a great way to stay on top of your health, is just cook your own food, and you know for the majority, you know what's going in there.
Yeah, that's a great point. The challenge is that the a lot of the type of people that we're talking to don't have time, or they think they don't have time to cook. So, I have one guy who, well, two actually, who racked up a ton of money on Uber Eats, like meal delivery, because it's just really convenient, right? But the problem is that the stuff they were eating made them feel bad. So you think that you're saving, okay, like 15 or 20 minutes for your meal prep, but then your performance is reduced for 2+ hours or probably longer. So you didn't really save anything. You'd be better off, like you said, making your own food, so you know what's going into it and you know that you're keeping it clean. So it's
For
like, yeah,
sure.
you're spending time there, but you're saving time later.
100%. I think a way that I try and combat that with clients is, there are meal prep companies, healthy meal prep companies, that offer that solution. So they actually do the cooking for you, and you can actually see the exact ingredients that go into the food. very macro friendly. Ideal if you're a busy executive or someone like a busy entrepreneur that doesn't have time to cook. Because you are right, there are some people that generally do not have the time, or it doesn't make sense for them to use time cooking. But you need to find a way to get around that. And I think meal prep is a fantastic way, or a meal prep company to give you that going forward, which is super cool. Um, yeah, what were you going to say, Joey? I can see your lips moving there.
I I just think that that's a perfect example of thinking about, you know, things from a higher perspective. Like, again, you're sure you may be losing time in the moment. It's taking you a little bit of extra time to cook your food, or like you said, you can just order a delivery service. But think about how that's going to help you throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month. Like, you're going to see improvements. It's exactly the same for sleeping more and doing stuff like journaling and meditation. It costs you a little bit more time, but the benefits are so great that you're getting more out of the rest of your time. So you're being more productive and you're really saving time. So I really want to impress that upon the people who are listening, and having that kind of perspective on decisions that they may be making, because it's not just a short term thing. It's what are the effects on the longer term, on the span of hours to days.
Yeah, 100%. It's those second, third, fourth order effects that are
Right.
really important there. Yeah, great. And on kind of the programs I run and with people that I coach, non-negotiables are a big thing. So having things that you stick to regardless of what else is going on in life. These are like your pillars. For you, what do you think are potentially your non-negotiables and ones that you advocate to people?
So the very first one is making your bed. I'm sure you've seen that video of the Navy admiral talking about making your bed.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
somebody who doesn't have their life together, it's an extremely powerful habit, because especially if no one will ever see, because you see, like, and then that discipline, or the lack thereof, spreads out throughout the rest of your life, leads to a messy kitchen, not managing your time, that kind of thing. And then a couple of other big ones are journaling, but brain dump journaling. So not Dear Diary type journaling, but brain dumping. So essentially just taking a blank sheet of paper and writing down whatever's on your mind. That has been probably the biggest thing that I've gotten positive feedback from my clients about. It is huge if you do that every day. And then meditation as well. So meditation is an extremely powerful habit, maybe the most powerful habit you can build, because it physically changes your brain. It increases your emotional control and your focus. But essentially, what it does is regular meditation shrinks the emotional center of your brain and prevents it from, literally, it's called amygdala hijack, prevents it from hijacking your system. So if you find yourself procrastinating or stress eating or doing things like that, meditating will help you gain control of that. So those are the big three.
awesome, man. That's a really good eye opener because I'm only doing one of those and I make my bed, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't do the other two. So I really want to dive into the kind of brain dump there. So how does that work? Just like on a simple breakdown for people.
Yeah, so like I said, it's very simple to do. Just grab a pen and paper and take a couple minutes, write down everything on your mind, whether it's related to work, your business, personal stuff, whatever it is, positive or negative or neutral. So you write it all down, and then you look at what you wrote. And from there, you have a different perspective. You can organize things, you can prioritize things, you can see, recurring thoughts or limiting beliefs, and you can start to reprogram those, which is a basically, to reprogram something like that, you reverse it with a positive affirmation. That sounds kind of woo woo, but there is psychology to that. So, how this really works is by writing something, you're using a different combination of neurons to do it, essentially. You're assembling your ideas in a different way. So, another example that I'm sure you've experienced is when you're talking to somebody about something you're stuck on, and then just by you talking, you suddenly get an idea, right? Well, that's because you're using different neural pathways. You're having to assemble all these words into something that makes sense. And by doing that, you have new insights and new ideas. Well, doing brain dumping or journaling is essentially communicating it to a piece of paper. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's one sided, but it's still essentially communicating. Like, I could just tell something to my cat and get the same exact benefits. But this is really powerful for people because, high performers, busy people have a lot on their mind. And the problem is when you have a lot on your mind, it fills up your working memory because your brain's trying to keep track of all this stuff, keep it bouncing around in your head. But when your working memory gets filled up, your mental performance drops. You're not as able to focus on something. So if you brain dump, you're essentially emptying your mind, kind of. You're bringing order to the chaos in your mind. I'll say that in a better way. And then you follow it up with some meditation, and then that primes you for productive work.
Love that. That's amazing. That's very well articulated. I completely understand that. And I've started, so I guess I use the external brain a little bit from kind of what you're saying. So I use like Evernote, open up Evernote. When I have something, I kind of note down like an idea or things like that. That's more from a business sense, but I don't really do it from a personal point of view or like a spur of the moment. And I guess that would kind of make me more present and probably reduce any kind of overthinking and things like that, right? Because it's just getting it out.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, it gives you a new perspective, so you're able to process things and see, oh, that's not very much of a priority right now. I can put that off to later, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And then regarding meditation there, so again, meditation is something I want to get into, and I've just been lazy to not do it, and it's something I need to work on. So, how do you recommend people get into it? Kind of timings, how do you do it? All of that kind of stuff.
So people overcomplicate meditation. They think that it's about silencing your thoughts, when in reality, it's about focusing on something despite your thoughts. So the way you can start off with meditating is start small. Start off with 2 or 3 minutes. Find a place where you can sit where you won't be disturbed. Close your eyes and breathe slowly in and out of your nose while you focus on the breath passing in and out of your nose. Now, if people have a problem or if people have a challenge with that, what they can do is use a guided meditation app such as Headspace, Calm, or Waking Up. And essentially, the way those work is you put on some headphones and a guy talks to you and tells you what to do. There's a couple minutes for silence so you can actually meditate. But that's kind of like training wheels for starting up the habit of meditation. And then as you go, as you build up that habit of sitting on the floor for 10 or 15 minutes a day, then you can take off the training wheels. But ultimately, you want to get up to doing 12 to 15-minute sessions. I believe that's how long the 8-week program that Harvard did, and they found those physical changes when people did 12 to 15-minute sessions a day for 8 weeks. The brain started showing changes.
Epic. So I need to get up to 12 to 15 minutes. Cool.
Yep.
Epic, man. And then lastly, it's been great to have you on, Joey. What do you think, if you could give one bit of advice to the audience that are listening to kind of level up their mindset or improve their psychology, what would it be?
So the thing that I almost always end podcasts with is about a concept called the locus of control. And real quick, the locus of control can be either external or internal. If you have an external locus of control, that means that you feel like you're a passenger in life. Life just happens to you. You don't have very much control. If you have an internal locus of control, then you believe that you are the driver with life. You can create your own destiny essentially. And I would strongly recommend people be mindful about their thoughts and their actions and think about where their locus of control lies. Think about how much control they feel they have and how much control they're really exerting on themselves and their surroundings and their lives. And if they find that their life isn't where they want to be, then they need to start pulling that locus of control internal, because we have so much power to direct our own lives, to impact our environment, to change our little piece of the world. Now with social media, we can change a bigger piece. But I would invite people to think about what they have responsibility for and therefore what they have control over. Because responsibility and control kind of go hand in hand. When you accept responsibility, and yes, even for bad things, which can be kind of painful, then you also accept control. And once you have control over something, that's very powerful, because then you can start shaping yourself or your environment in a way that makes you and other people better.
That's awesome. What a great way to end the podcast, Joey. Epic. I love that. And I'm a big fan of Locus of Control, that responsibility side, which is so important. So, Joey, for the audience that are listening, where can they find you? Plug away, let everybody know where they can get in contact.
Sure. So my main link to the online world is my Twitter account. So that is twitter.com/Cypreneur. And then I also post in my Telegram channel every day at random points in the day, and that is channel.cypreneur.com. It's a free group chat where I send text and voice messages. So those are the main two things. I'm going to be branching out a bit in the future, but I'm still working on those projects.
Awesome. Well, like I said, it was great to have you on, Joey. Some great value for the audience. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. So thank you very much. And then hopefully one day we can potentially meet in real life. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, dude, definitely. I definitely plan on going to the UK, get back to Edinburgh for sure.
Nice, man, for sure. Well, thank you very much for listening, guys. Give the podcast a 5-star rating if you did enjoy it, and I'll speak to you soon.